It's almost the end of October, and over these past few weeks, I've just been meditating and looking back over the Million Man March that I attended some 29 years ago, and how this march affected me and changed my life and kind of brought me into the person who I am today. So I want to share with the world uh, how this march really affected me. Let me give you a little backstory. When I was a young child, about 8, 9 years old, my grandmother was my Sunday school teacher. And my grandmother was teaching a Sunday school class, and she was talking about the wonder workers and the goodness of Jesus. And as I sat in this class and I was daydreaming and thinking about what it would have been like to live in a time that a man of that magnitude was walking the earth. And I said, I wish I could have been in that time. It would have been a really great time to see a man doing the wonder workings that was spoken of about Jesus. So as my Sunday school teacher, my grandmother had me to, as well as everyone in the class, to learn every book in the Bible. And we had to recite these books, adding 5 each Sunday that we would come to church until we were able to recite all 66 of the books from Genesis to Revelation. And after that was accomplished, we then had to go back and start learning a verse from each book and quote these verses in front of the Sunday school classes, and give our interpretation of what we thought these scriptures meant. And as my Sunday school teacher, my grandmother made it sure that, I was very proficient in doing this. I never wanted to let my grandmother down or disappoint her in any way. She had a high standard for her kids and her grandkids. So with that, I became very versed in the Bible as a young kid. I began to read the Bible about 8, 9 years old. I remember the pastor saying, would you open your Bible to St. John so-and-so chapter such and such verse? And as I picked up that Bible and I looked in the table of contents and found out exactly where John was and the verse that he was sending us to, and I looked at the book and I said, man, we almost in the middle or past the middle of the book. I said, how am I going to understand what's going on with what is in John when I don't know what's happening in the beginning of the book? So at that time, about 9 years old, I began to read the Bible, and I said I was going to read the Bible as I was taught in school by this great librarian how to read a book. So I began by going back to Genesis and starting in Genesis. And from the age of 9 to the age of about 18, I found myself finally in reaching Revelations. And I was really excited when I reached Revelation, because Revelation was a book that seemed like nobody could really have any understanding. And I said to myself, I'm going to read this book, and I'm going to be able to interpret this book and get some understanding of what's going on in this book. So at the age of 18, when I reached Revelations, I remember living in Atlanta with my father. I went there for the summer, and this is when I first entered Revelations. And when I started to read the book and all of the signs and just the symbolism that was in the book, I looked at the book and I said, man, I see why people can't understand this book, because there's so much universal stuff going on in the book. So at that time, I persisted to try to read it, and I read all the way through it, but I really could not grasp the understanding of that book. And then when I moved to Rochester, New York, at the age of about 19, to live with my uncle and his fiance, or his newly wife. Uh, One day I was sitting in the living room, and I was watching TV, and I was trying to find out see if there was anything on TV that was interesting that could keep my mind occupied, that I possibly could stay in the house that day. I didn't want to go out into the streets. But at that time, nothing was on the TV that caught my attention, so I cut the TV off, tossed the remote on the couch, and I went to proceed to leave out the house. And as I reached for the door, I heard a voice coming from the television, and I said, I know I cut the television off, man. And so by the time I turned around to see what his voice was coming from, which was the television, I saw it was an older model, floor model television, so it took a minute for the picture to come back into focus. So when the picture finally came back into focus, I I saw this gentleman standing there with this white suit on behind a glass podium, and with these two militant brothers standing on the side of him. And when I saw this gentleman, I distinctly knew who he. I've heard of him because of people talking about him in the streets and in my travels on the bus and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And so I said to myself, I said, this must be this man they call the minister. So I said, I've heard so much negative stuff about this guy. I said, man, let me sit down here and see what this guy got to say. I want to be able to judge him for myself and not by what I hear others say about him. So I sat down there and I listened to what the minister had to say. And I listened to a full 30 minutes of his message. And when his message was over, I said to myself, I said, wow, why do these people speak so ill of this man? I said, this man did not speak anything but the pure, unadulterated truth. And the Spirit said to me, remember when you was a little boy and you was sitting back in the church and you said you wish you was living in a time that a man was doing the wonder works and the things that Jesus was doing? And the Spirit said, this is your man. And the Spirit went on to enlighten me that Jesus did not die for anyone's sins. Jesus died because there were people who were hateful of truth. You know what I'm saying? And this man, the minister, was speaking that very same truth. And those that had destroyed and taken Jesus' life were seeking to do the same thing to this man, to the minister. So I said, wow, you know, and I was very taken by the message. I think the name of the show was called The Hour of Truth. And like I said, I only caught 30 minutes of it, and it was nothing but the pure, unadulterated truth. So as I went on with my life and this message constantly stayed in my head, I remember walking down the street one day. It probably was about 1993, sometime around in there. And I saw a flyer that was speaking about this event, this great march that they was going to have in Washington, D.C. And when I saw this flyer, I had already made it up in my mind that no matter what I had to do, whether I had to walk, hitchhike, some way, I was going to make it to this march. I wasn't even born at the time of the march in the 60s when Dr. King gave his great I Am a Dream speech. But I said I was going to make it to this march. So I talked to a few co-workers of mine, a couple of homeboys and stuff like that. And I persuaded them to let's take this trip. You know what I'm saying? Let's go down to DC and let's attend this march. You know what I'm saying? Let's stand up and want to be a change in our community and for our people. You know what I'm saying? Because it's something at that time and still to this day, it's needed. You know what I'm saying, in the black community and throughout the world. So we we got together and we took this trip and we went down to Washington D.C. and the greetings that we got from the black women and you know what I'm saying, the sisters and everything, it was just nothing but love and just being proud of us as black men uh, wanting to make that change. So we got to DC, hung out a little bit that night, but we went in early because we wanted to be up there next morning to make it to this march on time. So the next morning when we got up and we got down to the Capitol building, and I walked up beside the Capitol building, and I looked out onto this to the sea of men. As far as my eyes could see, it's like they just faded off into the sunset. It was a very, you know, it was an experience that I can't even imagine. It's just something so beautiful. And I almost lost my, you know, my bodily functions. I almost, pissed on myself. It was just so amazing just to see that sight. And as we progressed down into the crowd on the mall, we was like right there at the front, with at the back of the Capitol, and to look up at where the podium was sitting at, it was almost neck breaking. So I told the guys, I said, you know what I'm saying, used to being at home watching things on television and everything. So I said, let's try to make it over to this first Jumbotron so we can see everything, you know what I'm saying? We can see the different camera views and all that stuff. So we began to do that. And as we begin to proceed through the crowd, I mean, the brothers were so beautiful and everything. It was just like, it was no bumping, it was no shoving. Everything was just love. I mean, the brothers was opening up the way for us. It was like, brothers coming through, brothers coming through, brothers coming through. And it was like moving other brothers back as I proceed through this crowd. And I mean, I walked, I never bumped into anyone. Brothers all the way through was opening the way up for us. And then we finally reached this spot. And this spot was maybe about, a little circle, about 6 by 6, maybe. And there was no one standing there. So I was like, this is the perfect place for us to be. And so as we stood there, and I looked up and I saw the Jumbotron and everything, I said, yeah, this is where we need to be. And I listened to all of the speakers that was there. Jesse Jackson, the young man that spoke, I can't remember his name, but he was so elegant in his speech. Maya Angelou, you know what I'm saying? Just everybody spoke so marvelously. And then when it got to the point for the minister to come out, I can remember seeing him step down those steps at the Capitol with the Fruit of Islam following him. And it was a powerful moment. So as I'm looking up at the Jumbotron, and the minister reached the podium, I saw something that I had visualized, that was in a vision when I was a little child. I had a sharp pain in the back of my head right quick, like a memory pocket had burst. And I saw this vision that I had as a little child when there was a man standing, looked like he was standing in the heavens, because all of the clouds, you could see the clouds behind him, but it's like this man was standing in the heaven in front of a white building. And the whole world that came out that day to hear this man because he was in the clouds. So at that moment, I felt that pain, and I was taken back to a vision that I saw when this man was speaking from the clouds, and he had it looked like he had a military behind him in front of a white building. And the Spirit said, "This is that vision that you saw as a little boy, and remember that this is the man that you was asking for." So I listened to what the minister had to say, and a lot of the stuff that the minister spoke on that day was dead on to what I was studying at that time. When he spoke about the atonement and the king Akhenaten and all of that stuff, I was studying the 18th dynasty at that time with Akhenaten, and I had already came into my mind that it was Akhenaten who was the Moses of the Bible. You know what I'm saying? His grandfather thought Moses. It's just like I knew at that time that the minister was our Moses. You know what I'm saying? He was standing there on the Capitol, in the doors of a modern day Pharaoh, saying that, the God of our people said, "Let our people go." You understand? So I knew that this was the man that I was looking for. So after the march, everything, and I went back home, I was standing in my kitchen, and I was reflecting back on this march, and I was thinking about my my two sons, my stepsons, and my son I had at that time. I was reflecting on them, and I said that I wasn't going to another march. I said I was not going to attend another march with my sons. My father was also there at that march, but we was not together. And I said, no, I'm not going to attend another march with my son, no 25 years later or something like that, because if I had to do that, then that meant that this march was in vain. And so I said, no, I'm not going to attend another march, but I did begin to study. So as I'm standing there in the kitchen and I'm washing dishes and I'm reflecting back on this march and saying all the stuff in my mind about not attending another march, the Spirit came over me, and it came over me so heavy that I couldn't stand. I couldn't stand in one spot. So I took off running. And as I tried to run out my kitchen, I made it to the bottom of the stairs. And when I got to the bottom of the stairs, I fell on my knees because I couldn't go no further. It was just too heavy. And I said a prayer. And the prayer that I said, I asked the creator of the universe to reveal to me who I am to him, the universal being. If he would reveal to me who I am to him, that whatsoever that was asked of me, that I will do. After I finished that prayer, I was able to stand up and proceed up the stairs. When I got up to my room, I sat on the bed, and the Spirit said to me, "Get up, and I want you to go to the black bookstore around the corner." And I obeyed. When I got up and I went to this bookstore, and when I entered the door, first book that I saw when I walked through the door, it was a whole rack of the same books. And the book read, The Message to the Black Man by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I said, this is a book that I must have. Because if there's a message to the black man, I want to hear it. So that was one of the books that I purchased on that day, along with another book by a gentleman, I believe his name is Wallace DeBoge, which was a book called Egypt Revisited or Revised. I can't remember exactly what the name said on the book. But yeah, I bought that book, and I also bought a African child naming book, because I knew that with me asking for my identity from the creator of the universe, that it would come with a new name, and I needed to know the method of my people for child naming. So I bought that book. And once I gathered those three books together, I went back home and I began to study. And not only just those books, but I also became a strong follower of the nation. Investigating, finding out what was the foundation and how the nation was built, and what was the purpose of the nation. So I remember that up and coming year, 1996, when it was time for Savior's Day. And I said, yeah, I was so excited. I was like, this is, I got to see what the minister is going to speak about. I got to hear what he got to say. You know what I'm saying? And this was after he came back from his tour over in the Muslim world and throughout Africa and everything. And when he came out and he began to speak about those two men who was pictured behind him, and the first man that he began to speak about, when I saw this picture of this man, I said to myself, I know this man. I've seen this man somewhere before. And the Spirit said to me, how you know this man? This man is almost 100 years older than you. How could you possibly know this man? I said, no, it ain't from this world that I know this man. And it wasn't the picture that I knew him from, but it was the essence that I saw in the picture that was related to me, that I knew this man. And at the time, it never dawned on me, even when the minister began his lecture by saying that this man, born February 22nd, 1877, on the outskirts of Mecca, in the city called Arabia in Mecca. And so I'm listening to this, and he went on talking about the master and his purpose for coming here to find the lost sheep, and also referring to him as the one that Jesus spoke about, that said he would come, the Son of Man, that would come from the east. As lightning shineth from the east, even unto the west, so shall it be with the coming of the Son of Man. And like I said, I was very versed in the scriptures in the Bible because of my grandmother and everything. And he went on and he talked about Elijah's purpose for being the messenger of the master, Farad Muhammad. So as I'm listening to this and everything, I began to just put all these pieces in my mind that I have already learned and read about in the Bible. So, um, reading Daniel, not Daniel, but excuse me, but Ezekiel. Uh, there's no one in that book but Ezekiel that is referred to by that title called Son of Man. Nobody by the Creator has been referred to by that name, that title, Son of Man, more than Ezekiel. So I began to read Ezekiel again so I can get an idea of what was Ezekiel's purpose, so I can get an idea of what is the purpose of the Son of Man. So I remember reading in Ezekiel, I believe it's the 37th chapter, about Ezekiel being taken up on a mountain, up in the hills or something, to where he was able to see these dry bones that was in this valley. So it reflected back to me that we, black men, black people here in America, was that those dry bones that was in this valley. And I saw that day at the Million Man March, that we were a spiritually and mentally dead people that was looking for someone to breathe life into us, that we could stand up and become what the Creator intended for us to be. So with all that going on in my head, I also realized that the purpose of the Son of Man was to come and find one that would be his messenger. Now, if you know anything about the story about the Son of Man, he came to the dry bones and he spoke to the dry bones, but they just rattled. You know what I'm saying? They really didn't do anything. So he went back to the Creator and he told the Creator, well, I did what you asked me to do. You know what I'm saying? And the Creator was more like, you know what I'm saying, don't be dismayed, don't get upset, don't worry about that. But this time I want you to go back, and I don't want you to directly speak to the bones themselves. I want you to speak to the four winds. You understand? So from my understanding, Master Farad Muhammad been coming back and forth to America in the late 20s and stuff like that, in the early 30s, trying to reach black people here in America. But for some reason they would rattle, but they wouldn't hear what he had to say. So therefore he had to give it to the four winds. And the four winds became his messenger, which was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which began to teach about around 1934. You understand, from my understanding and everything. But yeah. And once again, with me, my background in the knowledge of the Bible and everything, it kind of distinctively made me remember of a book in the Bible that was titled God's Messenger, or My Messenger, but it was also mainly titled under the prophet Malachi. And then, I had a good friend, best friend of mine. His name was Malachi, and I was always say Malachi from the good book. So I remembered in that book that it spoke about the coming of one called Elijah, and that Elijah would have the task of turning the hearts of the fathers back to the children, and the hearts of the children back to the father, unless I come and smite the earth with a curse. I remember that very distinctively. So I began to understand what the scriptures were showing me, that it was using, as the ministers say, the Bible was using historical precedents to give you a picture of an idea of something that was going to happen or take place in the last days of great consequence. So all this stuff is being revealed to me, and I've been, just been enlightening me of what was happening in our time. You know what I'm saying? So many of us are so caught up in the Jesus of 2,000 years ago and not really paying attention to what's happening in our time. You understand? So the universe, my angels, everybody, they all was putting this puzzle together for me. And like I said, when I saw the minister standing on the Capitol step that day, I knew that he was our Moses. You understand? So if you know anything about the Bible, you know that Elijah, prophesied against the prophets of Baal. You know what I'm saying? And Elijah didn't come alone. Wherever Elijah went, Elijah had a faithful servant that followed him everywhere he went up into the time that he was taken. And I saw that same thing played out with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the minister. He stuck with the minister. The minister stuck with him all the way up into the time that he was taken. And that no matter, what allegations or whatever things that they said about, Elijah Muhammad, that the minister stuck there with him through it all. That was these, what's his name? Elisha. So I saw the minister being that to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And if you know anything about the Bible, there are 3 leadership roles in the Bible. The first leadership role is that one of a prophet. You know what I'm saying? A prophet is one who not just speaks in the place or in the absence of God, but a prophet is also a revealer of truth. You understand? And then you have what is called the high priest. The priest is one who brings God and his people into worship. He reflects God to the people, and he reflects the people to God. So he's like an axis for the sins of people, atoning for the sins of the people to the Creator. And lastly is the king, the ruler, the one who put the Creator's righteousness into effect as the head of government. You understand? So with these 3 leadership roles, I saw that being the Master Farad Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, and today the minister, Louis Farrakhan. And so yeah, with all of that and me being brought into the knowledge of all of that, it makes me wonder about what's going to happen when the minister is no longer with us. Who's going to be that next step up guy? Who's going to be that next step up leader? And I don't see one. And but I'm going to end this video, and I'm going to come back with you, and I'm going to tell you about a story that I had with a mature woman on a job one day. Thank you.